Let's go back now to Yaakov Katz, senior columnist at the Jerusalem Post, joining me from New York. I don't know if you're listening to Malcolm there. What are your concerns in the hours and perhaps days ahead?
Well, I think right now the ball's in the court of Hezbollah, and it has to decide how it's going to retaliate. Because on the one hand, Israel did preempt. It apparently took out the capability that Hezbollah was trying to use to launch those longer range rockets into Tel Aviv and into the center of the country. What we saw over the last hour and a half was the firing of about 350 rockets towards the north. Those are areas that have pretty much come under most of the Hezbollah rocket and drone attacks over the last 10 months. Many of those, about 200 or so, were said to have been intercepted by the IDF. But the question will be, is Hezbollah done? Or, Michael, does Hezbollah want to go another round and do try to get some of those longer range rockets into the Tel Aviv and into the center of Israel? That would provoke a larger Israeli response, likely, I would say, potentially into Beirut itself.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, what do you think Benjamin Netanyahu's calculation is when it comes to Hezbollah? He's faced a lot of internal criticism in Israel for months about all kinds of things. How far do you think he wants to go with Hezbollah? And what are the risks?
Well, I heard what you said before, Michael, about that some people have been thinking or saying that Netanyahu is actually trying to vie to get the U.S. involved into a larger war potentially against Hezbollah and Iran, and maybe that's what he's wanted. But I would say that the last 10 months have kind of shown that Israel doesn't want that. Israel has been trying to contain and limit the conflict in the north, to not escalate into something much bigger and greater, and has tried to keep it under wraps and just focused and isolated to what's happening in northern Israel and into southern Lebanon. So the fact that that's been Israel's position over the last 10 months, it might have changed. And it could be that this massive American military buildup now in the region has gotten Netanyahu to think, well, we have these American forces here now. We've pretty much finished degrading Hamas's capabilities in the south. There is now the resources and the attention span of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, to potentially take on Hezbollah in a bigger way. So that's always an option, but I would still think that the last 10 months do show where Israel is in its mindset, and the fact that we're supposed to have these new round of negotiations in Cairo about a potential hostage deal that could de-escalate the whole region if a deal is reached. So it seems that Israel's playing on multiple fronts at the time being, still fighting in Gaza, trying to contain Hezbollah in the north, and hoping that maybe a hostage deal will bring everything to an end.
You mentioned that, the ceasefire and hostage negotiations. How could this impact this, particularly if it goes further than it is now?
Well, look, Israel has said that it wants to get those hostages back home, and we know that every day that passes, those hostages' lives are in greater peril and risk. We just saw last week how 6 of the hostages, male hostages, were declared dead their bodies, were returned to Israel. They were all taken on October 7th alive, and they were killed over time inside those Hamas tunnels in Gaza. So Israel knows that the time is ticking, and there is not time for these hostages. If there is a deal, it would lead definitely to a ceasefire in Gaza, but I think it would have wider repercussions. Hezbollah has said it would stop its attacks against Israel. Iran, we know, has been waiting and has not yet attacked for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran also last month, which it blames on Israel, the Hamas leader who was killed in that IRGC guest house. So this deal, if reached, has really the potential to de-escalate the entire region. I think that's why, Michael, the Biden administration has been putting such a big effort and a lot of pressure on all sides to try to get this deal done, because they recognize that it can really bring an end to this war that has plagued the entire Middle East and even farther beyond for the last 10 months.
And in the not, I don't want to say background, but sort of hovering over all of this is Iran, which has promised its own revenge for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. What are your concerns about how easy it could get out of hand regionally if Iran decided it wanted to buy in at the moment?
Well, I think what we've learned over the last 10 months is that there's no longer these wars that Israel fights against one of Iran's proxies like it used to. It just fought against Hamas in Gaza, or just against Hezbollah in the north, or just against Palestinian insurgents and terrorist groups in the West Bank. Today, all of these different proxies that Iran has, including the Houthis in Yemen and Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, they're all connected as one. And if you fight a war with one, you're potentially fighting a war with all. And we all remember, Michael, in April, it was April 13th, when Iran launched 350 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones at Israel. So this is one big enemy that Israel is fighting against. And therefore, the assumption always needs to be now for the IDF that when it fights with one, it is fighting with all. And therefore, a wider war with Hezbollah will almost definitely mean that we'll likely see rockets and missiles and potentially drones that are going to be launched from Iran also at Israel. So Israel has to always keep that into consideration, that when it fights with one of these enemies, it actually has to be prepared for war with all the different fronts, with all of the different enemies at the same time.
Always good to see you, Yaakov Katz, there. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And we will be right back.